Hello, this is a walkthrough video of the first AAT sample assessment for Principles of Costing on Q 2022 Level 2 AAT. Right, so you've got an hour and a half, 7 tasks, 80 marks. Shouldn't be too time pressured, this one. But let's see how I get on. I haven't actually done this, although I do have the answers in front of me to check each one as we go along. So task 1 is 8 marks about classification and relationship of costs. So Rid has started working in an accountancy practice and has given some financial reports in relation to some clients. Which type of report is Rid looking at? So report 1 was published at Companies House. So we know that all limited companies have to file their statutory accounts with Companies House each year. That's the statutory accounts, so it's financial information. It's used by external parties to aid their decision making. Report 2 advises on product sales and margins made. So this is more of an internal report telling the business how much of each product has been sold and the profit margin that's been made on each. So for example, if you've sold something for £100, the profit was £20, then you would have a 20% profit margin, and that information would be useful within the business, so it is management information. Within report 2, Rid looked closer at the breakdown of costs for a client making beauty products. Classify which element of cost they relate to. Right, so elements of cost: materials, labour, overheads. So we've got wages, is obviously labour. Cost of coconut oil, so something you can see or touch, is a material. Sales staff salaries, so it's labour again, anything to do with the workers, wages and salaries is going to be labour. Packaging, it's got physical substance, so it's a material. Rent of the office building. Now, although the office building has obviously got physical substance, we're talking about the payment of the rent for it. So that's going to be an overhead. And the cost to produce a new online shopping website, again, it's a development cost. So again, that is going to be an overhead. Click on the answer button. We're on to task number 2, 10 marks. This task is about costing techniques. So Bowmore Electronics Limited make a single product. A production level of 5,000 units has the following costs. So this is to make 5,000 units. Complete the table below to show the total cost per unit at a production level of 5,000. So there's number of units that they told us about, absorbing the overheads over the number of units produced. So we're being told there to absorb the overheads based on the number of units. So other ways that we might absorb overheads would be labour hours or machine hours, but here it's telling us to do it on the number of units. So just it'd be the total overhead divide by 5,000 units. And we've got to enter our answers to 2 decimal places. Please make sure that you read the instructions. 2 decimal places. If I don't do that, I'm going to get it wrong, even if I've sort of got it right, if that makes sense. Right, so we've got to put down the elements. So remember, the elements are what we just saw in that last question. So materials, labour and overheads, and it's the same as what we've got up here as well. So if I just double click, it gives me the drop down menu. So my materials already completed for me at £6. So let's just check that definitely is materials. So if I do on the calculator 1,000 times 30, I get 30,000. and then divide that by the 5,000 units, it is indeed £6. I'm expecting the second one to be labour. Let's double check the maths again. So 2,500 hours, multiply it by the £15 gives you 37,500. Divide that by the 5,000 units and it is indeed £7.50. So I've got 2 rows left, and if I look at the drop down options, I'm left with overheads, direct cost or work in progress. So that sort of leads me to see that they want a subtotal for direct cost, which will just be the 6 plus the £7.50, which is £13.50. And then finally the overhead, and remember the overhead is being absorbed per unit. So I'm going to do £80,000 divide by the 5,000 units, which means that I'm going to be absorbing £16 per unit with a total unit production cost of £29.50. Just one other thing to mention, when you get a question like this, make sure it looks reasonable. So, if you suddenly sort of had the urge to type £80,000 in for the overhead, it doesn't look sensible. So it would kind of cause you to question what you had done, hopefully. Bowmore Electronics are considering what the unit product cost would become if they used an alternative overhead absorption method. So remember, our alternatives would be either labour hour or machine hour. So labour hour used when there's a lot of it's labour intensive, and machine hour used when it's heavily automated. So the current method of overhead absorption rate used is based on the number of units. We were told that in the question, and we've just calculated it above. An appropriate alternative basis for this company. So what would I do? Well, there's no mention of machine time. So really, we're kind of channeled into saying, well, it must be labour hours, meaning the overheads would be divided by. So if it's per labour hour, you always divide by the thing that you want per, if that makes sense. I'm not a cat. So if we want it per labour hour, we need to know how many hours are being used. So 2,500 hours. So that would be what we would divide by. Now, this would result in the overhead costs per unit increasing, decreasing, or staying the same. So logic tells me they're going to stay the same, because if my business is only making a single type of product, then ultimately, however we work it out, we're just going to be putting the same amount of overhead in. However, I just sort of try and prove that to you. So we worked out here that it was going to be £16 when we did our unit production cost calculation. Now, if we think about it in hours for a minute, so let's divide our £80,000, our overhead, by 2,500 hours, and that gives me £32 of overhead needs to be absorbed per hour. How long does each unit take to make? Well, if I'm using 2,500 hours to make 5,000 units, each one unit must be taking half an hour. So if it's £32 per hour, but I only need half an hour, each unit is still going to get £16 worth of overhead. So that sort of proves that it is still going to be the same. But as I said, the fact that it's a single unit that's being produced gives you a big clue to that. So on to task number 3. This is for 8 marks about recording costs. So we've got parts A and B. Identify which type of responsibility centre is most likely. So responsibility centres, people who have responsibility. So it could be a cost centre, just responsible for the costs, a profit centre, which is the revenues and the costs, or it could be an investment centre where they have responsibility for the asset as well. Right, so if it's an individual retail shop, that is going to have it's between profit and investment. An individual retail shop. So you haven't really, you've got like the whole business. So if it's an individual retail shop, the responsibility centres, no one other than the kind of the owner of the business is going to have overall responsibility because it's an individual retail shop. It's not one of many. If it was a branch of a retail shop, you know, like say, I don't know, John Lewis or Next or something, then I would be going for investment centre. But because it's an individual retail shop, the responsibility will be with the profits. So a profit centre is probably the best answer. So let's go on and make sure we remain happy with that. An accounts department, well, they're not actually selling anything. So that one's fairly straightforward, that it's a cost centre. And then we've got the Southern Division of a manufacturing organisation with its own capital budget. So capital is talking about the assets. It's a division of a bigger organisation, but it has got responsibility for the assets. So this one quite clearly is investment centre, which kind of, no, it doesn't. It could be more than one of each, but that kind of backs up that that first one is indeed profit, a profit centre. Nook Limited is a manufacturer of virtual reality headsets that uses an alphanumeric coding structure based on one profit centre and 2 cost centres as outlined below. Each code has a subcode, so each transaction will be coded as a 6-character reference. Right, so we're looking for 3 letters followed by 3 numbers. And we have to code the following revenue and expense transactions, which have been extracted from various records of the business. Right, so let's get going. So we've got sales to York. So sales is going to be SAL. Also, we're splitting it like this. So York in the UK. So the subcode is 100. Choice between UK and overseas there. They're quite nice telling us York's in the UK in case you didn't know. Production staff wages. So clue there, it's production. So it must be PDN. And it's production staff wages. So the people that are actually making the product directly linked to the cost of the product. So subcode there will be 300. So incidentally, production indirect costs would be things like the cleaners or the lubricants for the machines or the rent of the factory. The only direct costs will be the raw materials, the production staff wages, and occasionally you might get a direct expense, usually in the form of royalties, which is where you have to pay someone a fee every time you sort of use their idea in something that you're producing, but that rarely comes up. Mainly it's going to be raw materials and the production labour. So that's what we've got here. Packaging costs for the postage of headsets. Right, so postage is to do with selling and distribution. So SAD. Now, this is a little bit naughty what they've done here, I think, because you only have direct costs of production. So as soon as you've got admin and selling distribution, having these codes for direct costs, that you would just never use them. So a bit odd, but selling and distribution, except I've just looked at the answer and they've actually put that one in as a direct cost. Which is a puzzle. 700 for a direct cost, for packaging costs, for postage of headsets. Okay, I'll accept it for the purposes of the video. It kind of goes against everything that I've ever thought about indirect and direct costs, so that's not a good sign, is it? Packaging costs for postage of headsets. Is there any other clues here? Manufacturer of VR headsets. Oh, excuse me. I'm a bit baffed by that, to be honest, to use the lingo, but okay, I'll give it some thought and come back to it. Electronic components within the headset. Right, so that's definitely going to be production, PDN. And it's going to be direct. And then we've got bank charges. Now, again, most of the books would have a separate heading for that, which would be finance for bank charges. But we haven't got that option. So drawn towards administration there as the next best option. And that one will be indirect. Right, so I'm going to go and have a look in more detail at that direct indirect business, because I am a bit puzzled as to why that packaging costs there is 700. If you know, please put a message in the comments. Right, task number 4. This task is about calculating overhead absorption rates and looking at the behaviour of costs. So Grover Sachs Limited are manufacturers of cleaning products. Complete the following table showing fixed costs, variable costs, total costs and unit costs at the different levels of production. Enter your figures for unit costs to 2 decimal places. Everything else to the nearest pound. Right, so fixed costs stay the same regardless of the level of output. Variable costs obviously change in line with the level of output. So 2 ways you could approach this. You could say, right, 12,500 for 2,000 units. So if I make double the number of units, then my variable costs must double. Or you could say if it's £12,500 for 2,000 units, so on the calculator, 12,500 divided by 2,000 is £6.25 per unit. And then we can multiply that by the 4,000, which gives us 25,000. That method is probably slightly better for doing the whole table, because we know it's £6.25 per unit. And now I can just multiply that by the 12,500, which gives me 78125. Total cost is just the fixed and the variable added together. Oops. 108125. So they're all to the nearest whole pound, but unit costs to 2 decimal places. So to get the unit cost figure, and then if you get something like this where they've filled it in for you, just double check that what you think actually works for the one that they've given you. So if I've got 42,500 for total cost of 2,000 units, So I'll do 42,500 divided by 2,000 is indeed £21.25. So then let's do the next one. So we've got 55,000 divided by 4,000 works out at 13.75. We can see the effect of spreading those fixed costs over a greater number of units. I'm expecting the cost per unit for this last one to be really quite low. So 108,125 divided by 12,500 is £8.65. So there was no actual rounding to do there. They all worked out nice. But please remember, when you're doing rounding to 2 decimal places, you look to the 3rd decimal place. And if that number, the 3rd decimal place, is a 0, a 1, a 2, a 3, or a 4, then you leave the number in the 2nd decimal place as it is. Whereas if the number in the 3rd decimal place is either a 5, 6, a 7, an 8, or a 9, then that pushes up the number that you've got at the end for your 2nd decimal place. Most people should be fine with rounding, but just in case. Right, complete the following statement. As the units of production increases, the unit cost, I just mentioned this, didn't I? So we've seen the unit costs go down as the units of production increases. So it decreases because the fixed costs are the same at all levels. So as I said, you've got that same fixed cost being spread over more units, which drops the price per unit. Right, task number 5. So this is the first of these kind of pseudo spreadsheet questions. I call it a pseudo spreadsheet because it looks like a spreadsheet, but it isn't. The beauty of this is that it is human marked. Sorry. It's not human marked. Whereas when you get to level 3, the spreadsheets are human marked. They're actual proper downloading of Excel. Right, so select the correct options for cells in column A from the list provided. So this is like a spreadsheet. So we've got column A is here, and it's asking me to select the correct options. So this is just going to be a simple double click, fill in your manufacturing account. So if you've learnt, and hopefully you have, what the order of play is in the manufacturing account, you should know that that first subheading is direct materials used. We then add on our labour to get our direct cost. We then add on our manufacturing overheads to get our manufacturing cost. Adjust for opening and closing work in progress. Gives us our cost of goods manufactured. Adjust for opening and closing finished goods, which is our cost of goods sold. You have to know this, right? There's just no getting away from it. But if you think about the flow of making something, you know, you start with what you had in stock before, you add in what you've just bought in, you might have some left to put back in the cupboard. So that's your materials. You then add in the labour to the process, which gives you your direct cost. See, there again, I'm still baffled by that earlier question because you've got direct cost there. Anyway, I'll shut up about it now. Manufacturing overheads added on to give the manufacturing cost, and then you make your 2 adjustments. And with the stock adjustments, you start with opening, closing raw materials, then work in progress, then finished goods. So again, it follows the natural order of things. And another little kind of pattern in this is that everything is added except for any closing inventories, because they're not part of the cost yet because you've still got them, so they get subtracted. Right, so let's fill it in. So what's it actually asking us to do? I forgot we're doing it as a spreadsheet. So I've done that. Insert purchases of raw materials amount into cell B3. So it would appear that I've literally just got to work it out on my calculator and type it in. So purchases of raw materials is 17,500. It tells me in the question. So I'm going to type 17,500 in here, press enter. And I've got the closing. So then it says format cell. Oh, by the way, you might find it helpful to use the highlighter and highlight as you complete the tasks. Format cell B3 as accounting to nil decimal places. So B3, this one. So this one I've just done that looks a bit rogue. So I want it accounting. So in the number, I can drop down to accounting. At the moment, I've got 2 decimal places there. So I can use the decimal increase or decimal decrease, which is what I want. Just press that twice. Oh, so I only had to press it once. Oh no, I must have been a bit heavy-handed. Press it twice and it takes you down to 17,500 in the correct format. So I have now done that. Calculate all other missing figures in column B. So when it says calculate, you literally calculate them and put them in. And it even confirms that here. Do not use spreadsheet formulas when entering your answers. And we're showing answers to the nearest whole pound. Right, so direct materials used, you should know, is calculated as 5,000 plus 17,500 for the purchase of raw materials minus 6,000. So I make that 16,500. Now, if I just enter that, you can see it's actually already formatted this for me. You can see here it's in accounting, which is what it asked me to do in that previous cell. So I've dealt with that. It says all other missing figures. So, oh, who's pinging? Is that me? No, don't know who it is. So we've got direct materials used, add on the direct labour, so you can check the bits that they've done work. So we've got 16,500 plus 8,000 equals 24,500. That gives me confidence that I'm on the right track. Add on my manufacturing overheads, and that gives me 49,500. And then I add my opening inventory work in progress, subtract my closing work in progress. So I'm going to do 49,500, add 3,500, subtract 3,000. So probably didn't need the calculator, but never mind, that gives me 50,000. And then from there, keep going, it's added on all the time. So add 24,500, subtract 19,500, which gives me a cost of goods sold of 50. Oh, just typed over the wrong thing. 50,000 in there, and the bottom 55,000. Right, so I now believe that I have done all of that. And then it says underline and bold the contents in A1. So this is A1, bold, underline, make sure you do what it tells you, not italics. We can take the highlighter off, although you wouldn't be penalised for that. And then we have completed that question. Right, task 6 about labour and inventory calculations. So Nova Limited is a car service repair shop and has the following movement for part number PB100 into and out of its stores. Right, so we've got receipts on these dates in March. We've got an issue halfway through the month. And then after the issue, we've got some more coming in. So complete the table below. We don't have to fill this in, and in fact, it won't let us, so that's obvious. Complete the table below for the issue of inventory on the 17th of March to the nearest whole pound using FIFO and LIFO. Right, so when I'm using FIFO, this 750 will be all of those 200s, all of those 350, and then I'll need 150 out of this 14th of March batch. So what I need to do, I'm going to start with that bit and then sort of add on. So I'm going to work out how much each individual unit is. So I'm going to do, remember, per unit, so I divide by the units. So it's 2,800 divide by 350, which is £8, £8 per unit. And I said that to get to this 750, I need 150 of these. So I'm going to do my 8 multiplied by 150, which is a cost of £1,200. I then need all of these other two, so I'm going to add on the 1,500 and add on the 2,765, which gives me the wrong answer. Oh, let's try again. Right, have I added it up wrong? So 200 plus 350 is 550. Oh, I need 200, don't I? This is why it's better in a classroom. Someone would have corrected me. So I need 200 of those. Remember, they were £8 each, weren't they? Sorry, just checking. So we've got 8 times 200. Apologies. We then add on the 2,765 and the 1,500. So that gives me the correct answer, which is 5,865. If I'm doing LIFO, I'm going backwards. So see if I can add up properly this time. So 2 lots of 350 would be 700. So therefore I need 50 units from that very early batch. So let's find out how much each one is. So 1,500 divided by 200 is £7.50. So they're a bit cheaper back then. So £7.50 multiplied by 50 is 375. And then I add on the 2,765 and the 2,800, which gives me a LIFO cost of issue of 5,940. So the closing inventory has been valued at 3,630. So let's see what it looks. Is it FIFO or is it LIFO? Right, so the closing inventory would be the cost of everything. So let's add it all up. 1,500 plus 2,765 plus 2,800 plus 2,430, because this is now the, assume this is the closing inventory at the end of March now we're talking about. Because that table was only the 17th. It doesn't specify, but I assume that to be the case. So I've got a total cost of receipts, added all 4 of those numbers, of 9,495. So if I issue using LIFO, I'm going to minus 5,865, the cost of that issue, which gives me 3,630. So therefore, that must be the FIFO method. Obviously, if I take away a different number, I'm not going to get this number here. So I'm happy with that answer. Nova Limited pays a time rate of £15 per hour to its direct labour workforce for a standard 35-hour week. Any of the workforce working in excess of 35 hours per week is paid an overtime rate of time and a half. Right, so the premium on that will be half of 15, which is £7.50, and the payment would be the 15 added to the £7.50, which would be £22.50 per hour. Right, the company is looking to compare the time rate with a piecework rate and paying £10 per completed unit. Complete the table. Right, so first thing to note is it's asking for an overtime premium. So that's just the extra bit, just the £7.50, just the half again on top of the basic rate. So we've got, if it's a 35-hour working week, so we've got 4 hours with the overtime premium of £7.50. So £30, and it says to the nearest whole pound. So that's in there. The basic wage then, because it was the overtime premium in this column, the basic wage therefore must be all 39 hours multiplied by the £15 per hour, which is 585. It adds that up for me. So let's do that bit for the other person. So they're not going to have any overtime, are they? Because they've done bang on the hours. And they're going to do 35 hours at £15, which is 525. Right, so our SADA did 60 units piecework, and it's £10 per completed unit. So 60 times 10, that would be £600. So be a little bit cheaper for the business to pay piecework rather than what they're doing at the moment for that worker. The other one's done 55, which would be times by 10, giving £550. So that worker would actually be paid a bit more. So swings and roundabouts. And of course, if you're paying piecework, you've got to be careful that you don't accidentally dip under the minimum wage. Okay, task 7. Oh, the final task, 20 marks. So this is about budget calculations and exception reporting using formulas. Bright Star Limited is a manufacturer of board games. You have been provided with the following information in a spreadsheet. Using the information provided in cells A1 to E8, so it's the whole box, complete the following table. Formulas must be used for figures entered into cells B11, B15R. So conveniently, the ones where they want formulas have been slightly shaded. You must manually enter cell references. So what that means is, unlike Excel, I can't sort of go equals and then if I press the equals button, I can't go equals and then click on a cell. It's saying undefined. I've got to actually tell it what cell it's got to look at. That's what that means. Do not enter any spaces. You should use standard round brackets where relevant in formulas. The remaining cells should be completed by entering figures only. So don't put a formula in other words. Show adverse variances with a minus sign. Monetary values should be to the nearest whole pound. And the variance percent column has been pre-formatted to 2 decimal places. Right, so that's the reference material. Now we have to fill in this. Right, so it's a flexed budget. Well, it's not, yes. Right, so the budget for 5,000 units, actually it's not a flex budget, it's just a budget, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself to level 3 there. So revenue is going to be the 5,000 units times the £30 selling price, and we've got to do a formula here. So equals, I want to do the 5,000 units, that's going to be B4, multiply, which is shift and 8 to get the little star, and then I want to times that by B3, which is the selling price. Now if I press enter, I get a number, and if you just check on your calculator, have you got the number that you would expect, then that gives you a good clue. So let's go down the way. So direct materials going to be 1,000 kilos at £28 per kilo. That doesn't want a formula in here. Out of interest, if I try to do it, will it let me? If I go equals B7 times D7, enter, it's saying it doesn't like it. So that's a good thing, because you can't accidentally put that in. So we'll do 1,000 times 28, which is 28,000. Direct labour, 2,300 times by 15 is 34,500. And production overheads is just the £50,000. So to work out the budgeted profit or loss, we want to do that revenue number minus all three of these added together. So we did do a little experiment, and if you do this equals B11, and then you just go minus B12 minus B13 minus B14, it would appear you don't get the mark for it, even though it does give you the right number. So what we're looking to do here is go equals revenue, subtract the sum, open brackets, of cells B12, B13 and B14. So the way to tell it to do that is B12 colon, which is the two dots, one above the other, B14. Right, that's what it has done in the AAT mark scheme. So I would recommend, if you get one like this, that you follow that notion. So then we come to the variance. So we've got budgeted revenue, actual revenue. So I'd start by thinking, well, I haven't sold as much, I haven't got as much revenue as I hoped. So I've got an adverse variance. So I need to do a formula here to make sure that this comes out with a minus number, because it said show adverse variances with a minus sign. So to get a minus number here, I've got to do the smaller number take away the bigger number. So equals C11 subtract B11, which gives me the minus for the variance. And then be careful, because these are now costs. So if I've spent more than I budgeted, again, that is an adverse variance. So you can't just do the same, the same way around all the time. So, that one above there, we did actual takeaway budget. We now really are effectively doing budget takeaway actual. So 28,000 take away 33,750 gives me minus 5,750. Just typing it in now. It's not a shaded cell. Budget takeaway actual 34,500 subtract 36,000 is minus 1,500. And then budget takeaway actual 50 takeaway 45 is positive, favourable 5,000. And then with the profit or loss, so this one's back the other way, isn't it? Because if we've got less profit, then that's a bad thing. So I'm going to do actual takeaway budget 25650, takeaway 37,500 is minus 11850. And you can check that this column works. So should cancel out to 0 if we've done it right. So minus 9,600 minus 5,750 minus 1,500, add 5,000. And that's just scuppered my theory. And then we've got, oh yeah, sorry. I don't know what I'm talking about sometimes. Right, so the sum of revenue, take away all of those. So I'll do that again. So minus 9,600, then you're taking these away, aren't you, to get to the profit. So you can see that that does indeed work. Right, so then we've got the variances. So the variance percentage is the variance divided by the budget. So we could remember the name Victoria Beckham to remember that it's V divided by B. And then, of course, times by 100 to turn it into a percentage. So this top box wants a formula. So we are going to tell it to, every formula starts with equals. So we want D11, this figure here, oops, D11 divide by the budget, which is B11, and then times 100 to turn it into a percentage. So even the percentage there is coming up with a minus sign consistent with the variance. These are the ones we're just working out, so follow that same logic. So if it's a minus here, it's a minus there as well. So 5750 divide by 28,000 times 100. I've got 20.53 blah 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 in my calculator. So minus 20 point, and I'm rounding to 2 decimal places. So I've got 0.535 in my calculator. So because it's 535, the 5 pushes the 3 up and it becomes 20.54. Right, next one, 1500 divide by 34,500 times 100. So again, I've got a minus sign, so put that back in. And now I've got 0.3478, blah, 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 in my calculator. So 2 decimal places. So 0.347, the 7 pushes it up and it becomes 4.35. And then this one, so 5,000 divide by 50,000 times 100 is bang on 10%, but don't forget to put the 0.00 in. And then finally 11850 divide by 37,500 times 100. Again, be consistent, put the negative in. It's an adverse variance. 31.6 I've got in my calculator, so we type in minus 31.60. Identify whether the following variance is adverse or favourable. So the profit or loss variance is adverse because we thought we were going to make 37,500 of profit and we've made much less. So it's bad news for the business. So it's an adverse variance. Right, I think I'm done. So let's submit. So with the exception of that one about the direct cost, I'm reasonably happy with that. I think I did copy their answer in the end. So yeah, good. Full marks. Thanks for watching.